Hello, all you lovely people. Today is our Thursday History, deep dive into the history of psychology. This one's pretty exciting. I'll tell you why. This is actually a rerun, which is everyone knows reruns are exciting. This one is a replay, but it is exciting for anyone who is on the normal feed because you get the whole ding dang episode. Oftentimes, at least half to 2/3 of the episode is only available to patrons of the show. And this one ran as a sample only of a couple of minutes when it originally ran, but I'm running the whole thing to reward you for listening to this rerun. This is an episode about the use and invention of a device called the isolation helmet, sort of an odd treatment for anxiety and things. So it was a lot of fun to research this, and it's a lot of fun to repost it for everyone in its entirety. Next week, we will have a brand new history. There's a couple topics cooking, but I believe next week will be the evolution of the stereotype and actuality in early days of the United States of the Irish policeman. And where does that come from? Why does every other policeman in comedies from the 90s, particularly, or in early 2000s, have an Irish accent? Well, we're going to get into that. And we'll talk about what that meant socially for Irish immigrants at that time. Anyway, that'll be next week. Real quick, there may be a mention of a particular charity in this rerun episode, but I wanted to remind everyone that the charity of note for this particular month is an organization known as the Coalition for Humane Immigrant Rights, or CHIRLA for short, CHIRLA. You can go to chirla.org to learn more about this wonderful organization, to get involved, to support, and, as always, it costs nothing to share the link on social media. It's a very important cause, particularly right now. And if you do decide to join the Patreon for the Broken Brain, 50% of your donation will always go to the charity that was highlighted within the month you join, every single month forever and all time, which is how long I assume you will be donating. So half of your donation will go to Chirla, and there you go. If it works better for you to go directly there and support them, then go to chirla.org and do that. So enjoy this rerun of the history lesson about the isolation helmet. Make one of your own. Let me know.
The Broken Brain.
Welcome back to the Broken Brain. It's Thursday, and it's time for Thursday's History. It's our history lesson for today. If you are listening to the regular feed, you get the first several minutes of this. If you are on the Patreon as a patron, then you get the whole enchilada, the whole burrito, the whole any kind of, tortilla-based food that you want to call it. And today we're going to look at a little bit at the history of a device called an isolation helmet. By necessity, also talking about Hugo Gernsback, the guy who the science fiction awards are named after. This is very interesting. Real quick, I'm going to put a plug up for everybody for the D Coffee Foundation, our highlighted charity for the month. Go to D Coffee, that's DCOFFEY.org to learn more about this great organization started by Dr. Delise Coffey, who's a sports psychologist, and the good work that they're doing to help young people to find scholarships through athleticism, to help with their education and their future. dcoffee.org. Those of you who are patrons who have joined in this month of February, 50% of your donation will go to the D Coffee Foundation for the duration of your patronage, as long as you're a patron, or you can go and just donate directly and get involved there. As always, it doesn't cost anything to forward good organizations on your TikToks, on your Facebooks, on your Instagrams, on your Snapchats. Do you do that on Snapchat? I'm not really sure. But you know what? Go back and throw it up on y'all's MySpace and Tumblr as well. Now, getting into Gernsback. Distraction, first of all, is a big deal, especially if you are someone whose brain functions at all like mine or many of us. If you have ADHD, you have distractibility. That's what, one of the D's stands for in there. Actually, that's the word deficit, but attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, some people feel is very poorly named. The deficit part in particular, the distractibility that happens is not a lack of attention. What it is more of this experience like a roving attention that sometimes doesn't settle where we try to focus it, but it does tend to focus on lots of things. So you could even characterize it as an overabundance of attention, just perhaps a lack of control over that attention. People who are on the autism spectrum, or individuals who have lots of sensory issues, oversensitivities, undersensitivities, sometimes brains do not, in that case, if we think that way, do not tend to settle on or focus on things that people would expect them to all the time. If my brain is, if I'm expected socially to focus on the person in the front of the classroom, but my brain wants to focus on the ticking watch of the person next to me, it makes it hard to focus. And there's many other things that involve hyperfixation. And sometimes, even if we don't have a clinical diagnosis, although I would say with bipolar disorder, I have both bipolar disorder and ADHD. And, I definitely find some distractibility going according to my mood cycling as well. So, and then even if we don't rise to clinical diagnosable levels, many of us experience hyperfocus, distractibility, and other things. And Hugo Gernsback felt that this was a near universal experience, or at least common enough that it needed addressed. Nowadays, one of the approaches that we take is kind of a controlled burn, and that's where you actually see the use of fidget spinners, fidget cubes, fidget pins, fidgets. And technically, fidget is a whole nother thing we could talk about, but fidget is an old world. An old world. It's an old word, an old term from the old world, back across the Atlantic for some of us. But the concept of a fidget is basically busying ourselves with a partial distraction, something that is partially distracting, while we focus on other things around us. So if I'm trying to focus on the front of the room while using my hands to fidget with something, if we're doing both of those two, and that's what we forget sometimes if we just focus on the fidget. But if we are doing both things, that it's shown to be able to help. This is the opposite direction, which is another approach that we use: isolation and forced direction or a lack of stimulus. One example of this would be little earbuds that filter noise, like Loops. What's a brand name? They are not a sponsor, but that's the one that pops to my mind. But there are other filtering buds that you put in. They're not tied to any kind of a sound source. In fact, all they are generally is plastic with a construction of filtering to kind of cut down on that. And this is a good example of the opposite, by the way. You can have a controlled distractibility by many people will have one earbud in, and they'll have something playing that is somewhat distracting in situations where they're either still able to hear what's going on or they don't need to be using the input of sound. So once again, that's distraction, isolation, or editing or filtering to have less stimuli is what we're kind of talking about today. And that's where Gernsback decided to focus. Now, Hugo Gernsback was born in August 1884, and he lived till 1967. He was a Luxembourg American. He was an editor. He was a publisher. He was a writer. He was also an inventor who held over 80 patents for lots of different things. There's a real interesting other invention that I didn't get as much into were television goggles that he had to try to watch television on. He worked a lot with television and entertainment, being in the arts himself. And by the way, you can see some pictures of some of his inventions. I mean, you could just look him up. There's lots of images and things. I mean, the Wikipedia article about him has a lot of pictures, as well as some of the other articles that I'm going to tell you that I found. You can also see those pictures in, I put it up on my social media as well to announce this episode. You'll see that tomorrow or whenever on my TikTok, Instagram channels, on the Facebook group. Facebook group is Break a Brain or The Broken Brain if you're looking it up within Facebook. That wasn't available for Instagram and TikTok. For that one, It's Brainiacs Ahoy. You can also find social media links to my social media at dwighthurst.com/podcast. So if you want to see a little video with some of those pictures, they're kind of wild. And this isolation helmet we're going to get into is wild as well. Gernsburg actually started the radio station WRNY in New York, it looks like, and he was a significant figure in developing the electronics and radio industries. He was born in Luxembourg City, and to Berta and Moritz Gernsbacher, which was apparently, was changed when he came to immigrate to the United States, which was not uncommon for some European Americans, particularly Jewish European immigrants. He came to the United States in 1904, and during his life, he was married to. He was married 3 times. He worked in radio largely. He did lots of writing and moved into WRNY radio station that he started, but then also aired some of the very first television broadcasts. So he was really in on the issues of communication, directions of attention, and some of those things. That was really his bag and something that he thought a lot about. He helped to popularize amateur use of radio waves for wireless. That ties in with lots of hobbies that, you still see persist as today when you see ham radios and, different people get on some of those things. And I, we're right now, by the way, in an audio industry too. And he played a role, obviously, in development of radio. And we are in podcasting land right now, aren't we? But it's very interesting to me that he promoted amateur radio. Apparently, he helped to start the Wireless Association of America, which had some 10,000 people. He himself estimated that about 400,000 people in the U.S. were involved in some sort of amateur radio broadcasting or using it to communicate with other people. So as, an indie podcaster here, I'm like, wow, here's one of our, great or great grandfathers. There are many who contributed to that industry, but he was definitely one of them. He also wrote science fiction novels, among which was The Scientific Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Baron Munchausen, of course, the German folk hero who you may have seen in the movie that Terry Gilliam made, The Adventures of Baron Munchausen, I believe it's called. Kind of fun old movie. You should, check it out if you want. I don't, want to tell you how to live. But one of the interesting things about that, among his other novels, is that it featured a lot of gadgets, and Baron Munchausen in this case goes to Mars. That's not in the movie. That part of his life is apparently not covered in the movie, but he explores Mars as well as the moon. It looks like if you can read the description on Goodreads as well about this. Might be worth a read. Looks like it is 224 pages. And that's the kind of detail you expect from Thursday This Story. But many of the gadgets and machines, there were telepathy machines, molecular disintegrators, as well as other things. And many of those gadgets have appeared in other science fiction books and shows. I wonder, the phasers disintegrate people on Star Trek. If at times they do, depending on what they set for kill and for stun. I never hear them say set to disintegrate, but I've seen people disintegrate on that show. If you want to show Gernsback some love, then you might want to read it and go review. There's a couple of 3-star reviews on this baby. Only 5 people reviewed it, though. I'm going to guess, not a lot of people out there within the sound of my voice have read this. I'd love to hear what you think of it, by the way. So hit me up or, go and rate that on Goodreads. His work in science fiction actually earned him the honor of having the greatest award for written science fiction, the biggest award anyway. The Hugo Award was named after him. Now, what does this have to do with isolation? Well, you can see how this is a person who loved gadgets and loved tech. And we're going to switch over here. This is going to, anything further than this is going to be just for the patrons of the Patreon who are donating to help to keep the show going. So let's get a little bit more into the isolation technology that our friend Hugo pioneered. There's a great article about this invention on the website Open Culture, and it's called The Isolator, a 1925 helmet designed to eliminate distractions and increase productivity, created by sci-fi pioneer Hugo Gernsback. It's a long title, but it's very Googleable. So 1925. Now, this is a helmet, and boy, howdy, is this a helmet. If you don't feel like looking at the social meds or Googling it, you can just look at the cover art. I'm using a picture of it for the cover art of this episode. And damn, this is a wild-looking helmet, much bigger than if you were turned into a Cyberman, with an oxygen hose attached to it. So what it looks like is it's basically like a bell that was on your head. It looks kind of like one of those old-timey scuba diving underwater, diver helmets, except no windows on the sides, little eye holes, and skinnier, and it looks like a little bit taller. Some of the pictures, actually, it looks almost as wide, and then there's a little hose coming out front. Now, the eye holes are purposefully narrowed and will only allow straight forward looking. So your peripheral vision is apparently very limited in this. And, you have at least you have air, I guess. I mean, we wouldn't want there to be, I would think there'd be a mouth opening like Batman style, cowl style, but apparently not. But I did find there was an extra reason for that, is that it being fed oxygen, similar to if you have a burst of oxygen, or you remember those oxygen bars in the early 2000s where people would go and get a hit of oxygen? Is that still a thing? Is it? Anyway, the idea being, there's a quote here, the writer introduced a small oxygen tank attached to the helmet to increase the respiration and liven the subject considerably. The other thing about this helmet is that the interior was lined with cork, which was then covered with felt, I assume for comfort as well as the other purpose, which was soundproofing. So the idea was that you couldn't really hear anything. So this would be the equivalent. Now, if you do the little not low tech, I guess, because it's higher tech than the helmet, but you put in some earbuds with some white noise or just earplugs, and I guess you could get glasses with blinders, or blinders like a horse would wear. But the idea being that you don't get this level of isolation just from, at least from not wearing this helmet. The helmet, it kind of reminds me of the cone of silence that you would find on the old television show Get Smart. Speaking of things that most of you probably have not seen, but if you have, good for you. Hours of enjoyment. Now, the very picture that I'm using for the cover art for this episode shows one of the promotional pictures, apparently, that was originally released to show people how this worked. And apparently, according to one article that I read here, just image searching as well, associated with that, the original caption was, "The author at work in his private study, aided by the isolator. Outside noises being eliminated, the worker can concentrate with ease upon the subject at hand." I don't know. If you have any kind of claustrophobia, this looks like an absolute nightmare, like a torture device. But, a lot of these kinds of things look like that to many of us. Maybe today they look a little old-fashioned in that. I will say, I'm doing a history at some point about the Skinner boxes that were used to train rats. And, B.F. Skinner actually pioneered or it didn't really go anywhere, but a baby's playpen that was like a Skinner box that could be used to actually introduce things. And people, looking back on that now, I've heard this in undergraduate psych classes, will see a picture of that and say, what a horrible monster wanting to condition children. I will say this, that we'll get into it another time. But his thought process was that having something designed as a box, it would have lots of airflow and things like that. But his thought was that it was actually safer, because he always worried about, apparently, his children sticking a leg through a crib and hurting themselves, and climbing over and falling and things like that. So he actually did not think that way. He wanted it to be a place you could introduce toys and things for learning, but also something that he thought was safer. So he was trying to care for children. Okay, let's not malign his intentions, I guess, unless you know something I don't. Now, the idea of isolation and solitude from the outside world is one that is, it's as old as people are, I think. Not just an individual person, but mankind as a whole. I can't speak for prehistoric times. But knowing human nature as we see it now, I can only imagine that they probably had meditative pursuits of some kind when they weren't running from saber-toothed tigers. That might be on the Flintstones. But basically that, it was hard to live back then, but I'm sure there were, ceremonies and songs and, different things. They were still human beings, right? But as far as we know, we can see this in the Western and Eastern philosophies. You can see it amongst Buddhism and other, there's even with Christianity and some of the early medieval monks, meditation and silence. In fact, there were people who, had vows of silence, either for long periods of time or I think tried to do it forevs. And one of the thoughts about that was that eliminating distraction from the outside world was something that could help to funnel one's attention to the energy of living, to being able to transcend suffering, or to embrace and accept life, or to commune with God. You still see, in modern settings when there's someone, saying a prayer or a prayer in a group or whatever, you're not usually talking during that unless you're one of those naughty little kids who, hey, and you know what? If you caught me with my eyes open during the prayer, you know what that means? That means your eyes were open during the prayer. Come on, we've all been little kids, right? A version of this that we do see persist, and I'm going to get to some more specific ones that you might not know are going on, but a simple version would be someone unplugging from social media, right? Or even trying to just basically to distract themselves from some of the hustle and or the bustle. You also look for this sometimes when you go camping, right? Or go hiking, or go just outdoorsing of any kind. There's a documentary about this called Into Great Silence, where the filmmaker just spends time in a Carthusian monastery, I guess, and there's no talking in it because of vow of silence, and you just kind of get to see what these monks' lives are like. I have a friend who saw it at Sundance when it premiered. I'm sure it's available somewhere. I have not seen it, but it is on IMDb, looks like. Here we go. It came out in 2005. So isolation is a tool that people use for mental health and for focus. And we still have isolation helmets today. There's an article from 2017 on interestingengineering.com called "This Isolation Helmet Completely Blocks Out Workplace Distractions." The idea being very much the same. Now, this one, once again, I'm put some pictures of it on the social medias, but and you can look it up here as well. This isolation helmet, one of the big differences is it's got a big opening in the front, but it does come around so as to limit your peripheral vision. But it still looks a little bit more like a motorcycle helmet with slightly smaller opening that is meant to eliminate, whereas with a motorcycle helmet, of course, the visor, allows for peripheral vision. So, hey, if you own both, don't get them mixed up when you're riding your motorcycle. The one that they are profiling is the Helm Fawn by a company called Hochu Ryu, not a sponsor of the program. But you know what? Hey, if you are if you're an executive or an advertising marketing person for Hochu Ryu, and I know you guys are listening, and patrons apparently, so hey, hit me up. You know what? Let's work something out here. And apparently, being modern, moving away from the cork and felt and oxygen hose, they have included instead a microphone, Bluetooth capabilities, and a camera for virtual meetings. And it even has room for your smartphone, according to this. So, okay. Okay, so this also might be the potential issue. Whereas the original design was purposefully very, 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 shrinking the amount of potential. You wear that isolation helmet from 1925, man, you are not going to be, hearing anything or seeing very much of anything. So I guess, with a modern one, there's still an element of self-control that you do, but you could say you need self-control to even put that bad boy on in the first place. The author of this article makes the point that you can't tell if someone's attending a Skype meeting. Skype? Oh, this is written in 2017. Anyway, Skype also not a sponsor of the program. But, so you can't really tell who, if it says here if they're making a Skype appointment or catching up on the latest Game of Thrones episode. This is also during the heyday of Game of Thrones. And it calls that the most potentially dangerous part. I don't know. That sounds like it's something a manager would say to make that elevate that to the level of danger. So, in fact, helm phone is intended to, it is a portmanteau of helmet and phone. So this is a fiberglass shell with a polyethylene. There we go, polyethylene cloth interior. It's got a cool kind of paint job on the outside, by the way. So look up Helmphone, or it's HELMFON, and I'm sure that you'll want to stock up on these as well. So, though apparently one of the purposes of this was not only having isolation and limiting distraction, but to eliminate meeting rooms, which we've kind of done with telework, RIP for those in certain jobs nowadays. Sorry to hear. But telework has limited the amount of rooms that we have to have. But this was also, I'm really picturing a bunch of cubicles with people wearing this. And honestly, that looks in my mind kind of like a dystopian kind of movie would have. Then again, it is, probably more, I guess, a little bit more efficient than actually having a room. But, anyway, but the purpose of isolation and being able to not be distracted, could potentially be frustrated by having all these bells and whistles inside. Literal bells and whistles inside would also be distracting, but you get to choose what you play through the Bluetooth. That's the beauty of Bluetooth. It's no rules, just right, I think is Bluetooth's slogan, if I remember correctly. And you know what? To be honest, I'm not finding a lot of other isolation helmets that seem to be on the market. I just did some cursory Googling about that, but I didn't really see any. There's a lot of noise reducing features in motorcycle helmets and other things like that. I know that there are big over the ear headphones that even if you don't play anything through them are very, very quiet. I've seen places where they have done isolation and sensory deprivation experiments. Obviously you have sensory deprivation tanks, but there's also been experiments where they'll take little goggles and originally when they did these experiments, they would just cut ping pong balls kind of in half, not quite, a little bit bigger than half, and tape them with some medical tape on people's eyes, as well as then having earplugs and such. And in fact, they would even use a low level red light to kind of just block out any shadowy visual stimulus as well. And so that's complete sensory deprivation isolation. And well, the issue with that is that your brain will start to fill in the blanks and really look for any kind of stimulation. And apparently some people even experience hallucination, audio or, visual hallucination while doing something like that. I tried the ping pong thing, by the way, when I read about it. I cut up some ping pong balls like we all have and tried that out. And I didn't hallucinate or anything. One thing I did find very interesting was that the first time I did it I cut it irregularly to where there was a little thing that my peripheral vision could just barely see out of. And man, that little window became such a more meaningful stimulus. I felt like I could really see more of the room than you would think that you could when you start with a ping pong ball on your eyes or partial. And it's just really interesting. Try it sometime. You can just cup your hands and, if you're not crazy into stuff like that, like me, but you can try anything like that, and if you have just a little bit of a window or just a little bit to see, that becomes so meaningful to your brain. So isolation is a really interesting thing to mess with attention and to see, where your attention goes. So if you want to build one of these things, by the way, it was made of wood. I think I forgot to mention that. So the thing was made of wood. I don't know how much it weighed, but I can't imagine that it was nothing. So, picture this big thing on your head and, I don't know. Yeah. If anyone wants to make one, definitely hit me up. Let's do it. Well, this has been this week's History Dive, and I hope that you enjoy it, and we'll be back at you again soon. There's some more things that you'll see coming out here on the Patreon. I've got a big ton of videos of interviews to offload onto here as well. As you know, you get the videos, and generally you get them a few weeks before the audio comes out on the main feed, but you're going to get, I have a bunch of those. I had a slew of interviews that'll let you behind the curtain when I get a lot of my interviews come from publishers and publicists and people who seek out podcasts looking for people to come on. These are unpaid. They're not sponsorships or ads, although a lot of them have to do with creative projects, books, and things like that. There's never any money changing hands, and if there ever were, that's something that ethics, and I think even there's laws around that, I would let you know. But anyway, so I do get hit up by a lot of the publicists and people like that. And the funny thing is, once you get somebody who, if they handle clients who are good fit for the show, oh my word, after the first one, you might open your email and find 20 requests, and about 10 of them seem like, oh wow, perfect, and another 7 seem like pretty darn good, and then maybe 1 or 2 are like, not really for this show, but still maybe marginal. So anyway, if it's appropriate, I often will put it out there to diversify topics and things. So there's a lot of them, is the point. So get ready for a bunch of videos to drop in the next few weeks as well. All right. Loves to y'alls. You are great, and you help the program to stay afloat. And also, you give me the fun experience of being able to carve out some of the donations and send them to these charities every month. And that has been a really cool thing. So doubly, thanks for supporting the show, and thanks for giving me the experience of being able to participate in these cool charities, many of whom I've either interviewed or found. And that's pretty great. Y'all are great too. Bye.